Well, thank you very much indeed, and it's very nice to be here. And just to clarify, my first love was, of course, Thomas the Tank, and I think you can understand why no one has competed ever since. I'm going to keep this to the 20 minutes to make sure that we all fit in, so apologies that this will be a little quicker than planned. Here's another statistic, because everybody's been enjoying those today. We did ours with pretty colours. I was tempted to put another person up and still say 1 in 6 to test people's numeracy skills. But the reason that this matters is to talk about the work that we do currently in the UK in our literacy hubs. So when we say that 1 in 6 people don't have the literacy skills that they require, it has a whole series of effects. And we've already spoken today about employment, health, confidence. We've got information from KPMG that you'll see on there about the cost to the UK taxpayer, 2.5 billion every year. And the CBI report coming in, so the Confederation of British Industry, about employers' dissatisfaction. The thing that I would like you to take away from this is something that's quite important about our work, and that is that literacy means different things to different people. If you ask a teacher what literacy means, they might talk about levels or qualifications, the ability of a student to engage with a curriculum. To somebody working in a library service, it might be about enjoyment of reading, it might be about books. To an employer, it's about the number of applications they get that aren't spelled properly and the amount of support work they have to do around health and safety. So one of the things about our project is about looking at literacies, the plural thereof, and thinking about how different audiences care about them. The bit on the bottom is also quite important because all of our hubs work that I'm here to talk about is about intergenerational poor literacy, is about the fact that in the most deprived areas of the UK, the link between poverty, deprivation and poor literacy is incredibly strong and it is not inevitable. So our 1 in 6 figure doubles to 1 in 3 in the poorest areas of the UK. So we're a national charity based out of the UK, and we have 3 main areas of work, but all based around the central premise of equipping young people with the literacy skills that they need for life. So we look at working with schools, we support families, and we also lead campaigning and media work. You can find out more on our website, which is an absolute pain to navigate, but it's in those colours, so, you know, it's sort of pretty. What I'm here to talk about, though, is our National Literacy Trust hubs. So one of the really big challenges, when we know that literacy skills are related to poverty and deprivation, when we know that there are profound cycles of intergenerational poor literacy, what happens is that there becomes a really strong geographic component to that. What you have is the poorest literacy rates in the poorest areas with the least job opportunities, with the most effect from cuts in public services, which are deep and protracted and problematic. And so we as a charity decided that we needed to test a response that worked in the most challenging areas. So we currently have 3 literacy hubs in Middlesbrough, which is top right, in Bradford and in Peterborough. 3 very different communities, very different areas, but all of them among the poorest areas in the UK with the greatest literacy and educational challenges. You were talking earlier today about evidence and information, about where we go and where we can get information from. And I'm going to talk about audits and information. But just to give you a quick idea, this is a map that you can't see terribly well. The darker the colour, the worse it is. This is from Experian. Experian are a credit rating agency. They carry a huge amount of data about people to work out whether you should get a credit card, a mortgage, a whole series of other things. They gather and sift national data sets on an unprecedented scale. And we've been working with them to get them to create a literacy score based on a whole series of factors, including qualifications, employment, NEET status, so young people not in education, employment and training. The point about this is not the data in and of itself, as useful as this is. It has 2 other factors. One is that we can go to businesses and say, we know that this matters to you because this is your consumer and your employer footprint. This is the problem. You need to invest in literacy. It's your business. So going back to what I said earlier about why people care about literacy in different ways. The second factor about this is that it is possible to make conclusions about literacy from data that we wouldn't usually automatically think of. One of the challenges when we're working around literacy is that we tend to say, well, where's literacy bad? Well, kids are doing badly at age X, doing exam Y. Well, that's not where the problem started. That doesn't mean the problem isn't greater younger. That doesn't mean the problem doesn't exist somewhere else. But actually looking at proxy data around literacies has been very powerful for us to get people to work with us. So, Where do the literacy hubs work? It's a place-based solution. It's a defined geographic area where at least 3 of the wards are the most deprived, intergenerational low literacy, schools are not breaking the cycle, where there's an engaged local partner, currently local authorities, but not exclusively, and where there's scope for sustainability. And the only one I pick out of there is where schools are not breaking the cycle. So, for example, Tower Hamlets in London is one of the poorest areas of the UK. Adult skills there are relatively low. Early years skills, communication and language of young people, is pretty bad, but the children are above average coming out of school. Schools there are doing what we would want them to do, which is that they are breaking that cycle and giving young people the opportunities they need. Therefore, that's not an area where we as the National Literacy Trust would try to run a literacy hub, because somebody else is already dealing with the problem to some extent. So, believe it or not, this is a National Literacy Trust hub. Across the top, we've got our 3 big outcomes, increasing literacy levels being perhaps the most important. But we do this in a number of other ways. It is about awareness and it's about attitude, and it is about partners and prioritisation. I'm going to give you some examples. The only thing I'd like to pick out of here in any detail is the audit process. So when we've identified that this area is poor, that there is intergenerational low literacy, we're not going to go into Middlesbrough and work with 240,000 people, because it is an impossibility. What we actually have to do is work out who within those communities has the biggest literacy problems. So we look at the geographic and the demographic. So boys are doing particularly badly. Great. Are they white working class boys? Are they newly arrived communities? Where are they from? At what age are they doing poorly? Is it really a gender divide, or is it a geographic divide that makes it look like a gender divide? Quick library example in there in terms of the audit as well and the other information we bring in. One of the areas we worked in was doing brilliantly on the Summer Reading Challenge. So a programme run in the UK similar to your summer reading programme, where young people should go in and complete a number of books and receive awards. As an area, they were doing fantastically. When you broke it down library by library, none of the libraries in the 3 poorest areas had really any engagement in the programme at all. So we have to start by going back to what the underlying data actually says. We want to look at employment, we want to look at social housing data, we want to look at library membership and borrowing rates. We don't just want to look at school data, which is what very often a local authority partner might think is the most important. We then have 4 key changes which we bring in. One is at strategic level, so we have to get the right partners in the room. Major media campaign, we have to get the right partners then engaged. Then we have to actually put in some programmes, and then we have to see if it's working. So this is what I mean by all of those. These are the kind of people that we would say make up a hub partnership. So we've got a local authority and National Literacy Trust at the start. We then want the local sports team. So in Bradford, that's the cricket club and that's the table tennis league. In Middlesbrough, it's the football club. In Peterborough, it's the Peterborough Phantoms. It's the ice hockey team. They are the groups that the people we want to work with follow and care about. We then want to look at public health. So let's take our community analogy and where we can reach people. We've got somebody living in social housing with poor literacy. They're not currently in work. Their environment consists of how far they walk from their home to the local shop, from their home to the local children's centre, and to the job centre. That's as far as they need to go in order to live their life on a day-to-day basis. The only other places they have to go are places around doctors, dentists, and other requirements for health, things they can't avoid. So if we want to work with those people, if we want to message them and reach them, we have to go where those people are going to. Libraries are incredibly important, as are schools and any other educational support. But as somebody was saying to me when we were chatting, there's a lady up in Middlesbrough who's now become a literacy champion, and we were talking about free provision. She said, oh, no, I know the library does internet and training and courses and programmes, but all of my experience at school was really bad. I didn't like reading, I wasn't good at it, people made fun of me, I've never got into books. The idea of going into an entire building full of books is like asking somebody scared of snakes to go into a reptile house. It doesn't matter how nice everything else is, but that environment isn't one that she felt that she could enter until somebody else took her along for the first time. We've already spoken in other presentations about the importance of culture, and transport is a good media one for us. If you want a media campaign and you want people to do it, Local press is brilliant, local newspaper is good, lots of people with poor literacy won't read that, so we do Polish radio transmissions on local radio, we put posters up on local buses as well. If you look at the demographic of the people with the poorest literacy skills, we found that they're most likely to use public transport, and therefore we put information and messages in as simple format as possible where people are going to go. But that is a very quick example of the range of partners that we think you need. Common barriers. So, these are common barriers to what we would probably think of as literacy. Some of them might also be common barriers to the use of libraries or other institutions. So, poverty, time, transport, low proficiency, poor life experiences. We had a question from over here from Dublin Library Service about how you get those least engaged for the first time. Couple of things that I would say. One of them is that a lot of our programs are multi-year. We start by saying, okay, if we want to get people from a particular housing association involved because we know that that is a pocket of poor literacy and deprivation, you start with those a bit more confident. You bring them in on a program connected with their kids, for example, at a children's centre. They go through a reading program, a literacy, a stay and play. They then become volunteers and advocates for it, and they're then challenged to bring in the next group of parents, the next group of families, their friends. One of the things about barriers is that it's very easy when we are working in some areas to think, okay, most of these barriers that we're talking about are structural or institutional. The barriers are also personal. So the barriers that I come with into a room are that I am white, I am male, I am educated, I'm wearing a suit, I sound so posh I should be on a BBC TV drama. The idea that people with poor literacy skills or from a different group or environment are going to listen to me and think that I have any idea what their life is like is a nonsense. We did a consultation with a local authority that I won't name in England, and they were saying, right, our problem is, our biggest literacy challenge is around men from Southeast Asian backgrounds. That's the group that we really want to target and work with. There was me. There was then a room of 7 white women, all of whom were of an age that they would probably, have a cashmere sweater somewhere in their wardrobe. Now, that's not to say that they weren't all experts in their area, but the idea that that group of us could in some way put together something that would reach that community and understand what those challenges are is a nonsense. So we, when we were looking at literacy hubs, had to think, who is the authentic voice in the area, and how do I make them want to work with me? Who's the sharp-elbowed mum on the housing estate? Who is the local imam? Who's the person in the sports team who does the Sunday league? Who is the person that the people I want to reach will listen to and care about, because they're sure as hell not going to care what I say? So, place-based approaches, and I have 4.5 minutes. Place-based approaches are things like the Harlem Children's Zone. Save the Children has done a lot of work, but it essentially says that the challenges around any issue, so in this case for us it's literacy, are defined, circumscribed and explained by the place in which they are. So you can't just say that everybody has the same literacy problem across England or the UK. What it's about is the community they grow up in, it's the opportunities they have, it's the influences that they get. So the first one is, and there are 5 principles, and we've got pretty pictures now. So we're looking at a strong focused commitment to a comprehensive approach to literacy that doesn't say the solution sits in one place. It's not about schools. It's not about libraries. It's not even about schools and libraries together. It is about an entire community infrastructure. So quick examples here. One of the challenges that we face, especially in Middlesbrough, is young people's language and literacy skills when they reach school. So we can do stuff with the early years settings. That's great. We can put in programs. We can support teachers. But we also did a major media campaign. So the green poster there is on the edge of bus stops all around the town. We pulled in media partners so it was going out in different languages. Bliss is the very premature baby unit, the neonatal unit in James Cook Hospital. We provided books and packs to parents of children in incubators. The importance of maternal voice and all of those things is absolutely good practice around early years care. But it gave us the trigger to say, if it is okay to be telling stories and reading to children when they are so tiny that they are hooked up to all kinds of machines to keep them alive, it's absolutely great to do it when you've got your kid at home, when they're 1, 2 and 5 years old. So it was about where do we message that effectively. So going back then, obviously libraries we also brought in terms of one of the big disconnects was that early years settings weren't using the library service, and a lot of the parents might go to a children's centre but didn't belong to the library. So we got those two groups to work together and take a bunch of mums on a walking tour to their local library and sign them up. And that was about somebody they trusted being the early years worker to take them into that environment that they weren't comfortable with. Principle 2, coordinated multi-agency approach. Vivacity is in Peterborough. That is the libraries, it covers museums, it covers sport, a whole series of things. That's some guys dressed up in medieval armour jousting at one another. That's a literacy project. That was a cultural historical festival that they were running in the town. We worked with them in Peterborough to have a Friday introduction for school kids. Bunches of schools came along and did historical recreation, and before that they had to do a whole series of research about the history and period and came along with their heraldry and cheered their knights and booed when they got knocked off the horses. So for us it's about finding ways that is literacy by stealth, if you like. Tripartite approach. So we want development, and corporate cannot be underestimated here. Corporate is important for many reasons, partly funding because we're a charity, but it's also about motivation. The biggest motivator for somebody to develop their literacy skills is having a child, okay? Number one, straightforward. So we do lots of early years work with public health. The other motivators, though, are going to be when somebody wants a job or wants a better job. If you've got local employers that have a major name and reputation saying literacy matters, it's about that event horizon. It's about what's going to motivate me to go and do it. For teenage boys, especially for teenage children at risk of dropping out of school, we get employers into the schools to do speaking and listening literacy skills because they've got great life aspirations. They want to be, whether it's soccer players, doctors or whatever else. But the reality is that they can't translate what they're sitting there doing and reading into the life that they want. And it takes somebody who's not a teacher to come in and say, if you want to wear the suit and drive the Mercedes that I just drove up to your school in, you need to do this work. It's about creating those links to break down barriers. And so that's where business becomes an advocate for literacy and a partner in it, but that's because their understanding of literacy is again different. Medium and long-term approaches. Intergenerational literacy is not going to be solved quickly. We're 10 years in each of the hubs as a minimum, changing systems as we go. And that goes back to the assuming that any program you're going to run, as we run them in the literacy hubs, what we say is if you're going to run them in the hubs, you can't assume you're going to get the people you want first time. You have to get buy-in from the local authorities, from our partners to say, this is a multi-year program and we know who we're trying to reach. We're not going to reach them for 3 years. Because the reality of communities and engagement is that it doesn't happen instantly. And then a strong and visible local leadership at senior level. So, quick on this then. We have a senior steering group in each of our hubs, which consists of a couple of top bods, as they like to be called, because, you know, they're hip and with it, from the local authority, usually in education and regeneration, somebody from public health, a couple of elected portfolio holders, and then a couple of people from business. Essentially, the people we want round that table to buy into our 10-year commitment to say it's going to take time to do this are people who can get us data, who can open doors and can say, actually, this is serious, we want to get the mayor, we'll do an interview with the local press, whatever it is. It's about that strategic credibility, and then we as hub managers and on the programme have to manage them upwards and keep them on track. And make sure that they're not suddenly going to go, oh, but our reading levels have gone down, time to change direction. So, this is a quick idea, just bringing libraries fully into the mix of what we do as a quick splash across the 3 literacy hubs, Bradford, Middlesbrough and Peterborough. The only reason that Peterborough isn't really actively involved in our early years work there is because we're not doing any yet, but we will be next year. The important thing for us about libraries and a number of other partners is, the bottom ones, is that it is about strategy and publicity as much as it is about everything else. All of the programs and activities we try to support, we bring other partners in, but the reality for us is that when we're working with library services in our 3 hubs, they have to fulfil that wider role so that they don't get ignored as the people who sit there and give out books to children, which is the danger if we're working in an area around literacy projects. 2 quick examples and then I am done, and I have run over. So, one program example, James Cook University Hospital. The data in Middlesbrough said that children were starting school without the reading levels that they needed. The early years settings were saturated. We ran some programs, we couldn't do anything else. We did our data analysis and audit and said, where are people going to go? And so the logical thing was to start putting books in hospitals and working in early years. The two important things out of that is we've developed a pathway of literacy and health for all new babies that goes in their red book. So when children are born, they get a red book which tracks immunisation and health. Every new baby born in Middlesbrough, their parents get this pack which has key literacy activities they can do and suggestions and recommendations on the same roadmap as immunisation and health, because it is that important, because the literacy underpinning and those early life and skill development are as important as is your child eating well enough and are they immunised. So that's one of the things that we have done there. And then dad champions and community engagement. So in Bradford, we started to engage dads in early year settings by running sessions that dads cared about. It was outdoor sport, it was crafts, it was how to build a bookcase. Literacy was a secondary part of that. Those dads are now the ones who are community dad champions. They're the ones who have other dads from their area come round to their kitchen each week and talk about it. Because those dads aren't willing to go to the children's centre still. They don't want to. It's not an environment they're comfortable in. Maybe they don't have the language skills. But they do go and have a cup of tea with their neighbour down the street who can pass that information on. So that is about empowering communities to be long-term agents of change. Impact. Loads of people have seen stuff. We work with lots of schools. We run pilots that are tested by an external evaluator. We manage to get lots of free books. Mostly that doesn't particularly matter to me. It does to our funders, it does to our evaluators. We don't want to do something which doesn't matter. What we're trying to do, though, is create long-term intergenerational change. And the very last thing I'll say is that literacy hubs start with that as its purpose. How we do it is absolutely flexible and changeable. We're not wedded to any one idea or any one approach, and we will do what the community needs and the people we work with, and we will be responsive.